6 months after the war ended, the galaxy was a different place entirely. The Galactic Federation held its first assembly on the world of New Hope, a planet that had been built specifically as a meeting place for all the free species of the galaxy. The Great Hall could hold representatives from 10,000 worlds, and every seat was filled with beings who had never been allowed to speak freely. Before President Kim Tae-jin of Earth stood at the podium and looked out at an audience that included former slaves, former prisoners, and former rebels who were now the leaders of their liberated worlds. Behind him hung a banner showing 6 young faces, the humans who had died to make this moment possible, Ji-won's mother. Park Yoon-hee sat in the front, row, wearing a simple dress decorated with flowers from a dozen different worlds. The seeds that her daughter had planted on Kepler 442b had spread across the galaxy, and now alien children everywhere played in gardens that bloomed with earth flowers. Mixed with native plants, Elder Thymel of the Vorthons was now the Federation's Minister of Agriculture, and he worked tirelessly to share farming knowledge between species so that no world would ever again face starvation while others had abundance. His blue skin showed the lines of age, but his eyes sparkled with hope. Admiral Lee Hyun-woo had retired from military service and now served as the Federation's Director of Peacekeeping. His job was to make sure that the new galaxy would never again need massive fleets and weapons to settle disputes between species. Captain Park Seo-jin commanded the Federation's exploration fleet that was mapping unknown regions of the galaxy and making contact with isolated species who had hidden from the Empire for centuries. Her ship still carried the name Ji-won's Garden, but now it carried seeds and farming equipment instead of weapons. The former Emperor Malthus was serving his sentence by working in the rehabilitation centers where former Imperial officers were learning to live without the power to control others. Many of them discovered that helping people was more satisfying than ruling them. Commander Zelvan had been assigned to work in a school on Kepler 442b, where he taught young Vorthans about the history of the Empire, so that future generations would understand the dangers of letting any group gain too much power over others. The Federation Council included representatives from every known species, and they made decisions by consensus, rather than by force. The rules were simple. Every being had the right to live freely. Every world had the right to govern itself, and every species had the right to help others without asking permission. Trade flowed freely between worlds as former. Imperial restrictions were lifted, and species could share their knowledge and resources without fear. Vorthon farmers taught water conservation to desert species, while ocean dwellers shared fishing techniques with lake communities. Medical knowledge spread rapidly as human doctors worked with alien healers to develop treatments that could help all forms of life. Yuna's healing techniques had been preserved and expanded into a galactic medical database that saved millions of lives every year. Technology. Sharing programs allowed every species to benefit from advances made by others. Minho's soil treatment machines were being used on hundreds of worlds, while alien innovations in energy and materials helped humans build better ships and tools. Communication. Networks connected every world in the galaxy, allowing instant translation between any languages and enabling cultural exchange. On a scale never before imagined, Kyung-soo's dream of universal understanding was becoming reality. Education systems were established to teach children of all species about the history of the galaxy, including the story of 6 young humans who had chosen to help others even when it cost them everything. Schools across the galaxy held remembrance ceremonies on the anniversary of their execution. The planet Nexus Prime had been transformed from the Imperial capital into a memorial world where visitors could learn about the dangers of absolute power and the importance of standing up for what was right. The former throne room was now a library filled with stories of resistance and hope. Memorial gardens on 1,000 worlds grew flowers that Ji-won had discovered during her research. Each garden contained plants from multiple species growing together in harmony As a symbol of what cooperation could accomplish, Minho's workshop had been recreated as a teaching facility where young engineers from different species worked together to solve problems and build better tools for helping others. His design principles were taught as a model for technology that served life rather than destroying it. The war that would reshape the galaxy began at exactly noon on Nexus Prime, when human battle fleets appeared in the sky above the Imperial capital like a storm of metal and fire. The Empire's most powerful world had never been attacked in 10,000 years, and its defenses were not prepared for the fury that humans brought to their doorstep. Admiral Lee Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of Soul's Revenge and watched as his fleet moved into position around the planet that had murdered 6 innocent children. His orders were clear: disable Imperial command centers, capture enemy leaders alive, and liberate every prisoner held in Imperial dungeons. Captain Park Seojin led the assault on the planetary shields that protected Nexus Prime from attack. Her ship Ji-won's Garden fired weapons that had been designed specifically to penetrate Imperial defensive technology. The shields that had protected the capital for millennia fell in less than 10 minutes. The defense fleet that rushed to meet the human attackers was commanded by Admiral Drakos, the Empire's greatest military leader, who had conquered more worlds than any other Imperial officer. He had never lost a battle and could not believe that primitive humans dared to challenge his superiority. But Admiral Drakos learned quickly that human warfare was unlike anything the Empire had faced before human ships moved like dancers weaving between Imperial vessels, too fast to target, while their weapons struck with surgical precision, at exactly the right spots to disable without destroying. The Imperial Admiral watched in growing horror as his massive dreadnoughts were systematically taken apart by human fighters that seemed to know exactly where every weak point was located. His ships were powerful but slow, while human vessels were fast and smart. Captain Park Seojin's ship dove through the Imperial formation like a blade cutting through paper. Her crew had studied Imperial ship designs for years and knew that the massive vessels had blind spots where their weapons could not fire. The humans exploited every weakness. Within 2 hours, the orbital defense of Nexus Prime had been completely destroyed, without the loss of a single human ship. The Imperial fleet that had seemed invincible was now floating helplessly in space with their crews captured and their weapons disabled. But the real surprise came when human forces landed on the planet itself. The Empire expected to face brutal invaders who would destroy everything in their path. Instead, they found liberators who protected civilians and targeted only military installations. Human soldiers moved through the streets of the capital city with precision and discipline. They carried weapons that could stun enemies instead of killing them, and they brought medical supplies to treat wounded civilians caught in the fighting. The Imperial Palace, where the Emperor had ruled for 800 years, was surrounded by human forces within 6 hours of the invasion beginning. The ancient ruler had never imagined that anyone could penetrate his defenses, but humans had planned this assault for decades. Captain Park Seojin herself led the team that entered the throne room where Emperor Malthus sat, on his crystal chair wearing robes that had been woven from the silk of 1,000 conquered worlds. He expected to be executed immediately like other conquered rulers. Instead, Captain Park placed him under arrest for crimes against sentient beings, and informed him that he would receive a fair trial with legal representation and the right to present evidence in his defense. The Emperor was shocked because the Empire had never shown such mercy to its enemies. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, human forces were liberating Imperial prison worlds and freeing millions of beings who had been enslaved for opposing Imperial rule. The liberated prisoners included scientists, artists, teachers, and leaders who had been silenced for speaking truth to power. The Battle of Kepler 442b was fought by Vorthan farmers who had learned courage from 6 dead humans. Elder Thymel led his people against the Imperial garrison that had been sent to punish them for accepting human help. The old alien fought, with farm tools, but his heart was full of righteous anger. Human reinforcements arrived to support the Vorthan uprising, and together they drove the Imperial forces off the planet that had been the scene of so much kindness and cruelty. The fields, where Jiwan had taught children to plant flowers, became a symbol of resistance. On the mining world of Zerion, the alien workers who had been forced to extract valuable minerals for the Empire rose up when human ships arrived to support them. The revolt spread from mine to mine until the entire planet was free. The water world of Aquatica saw its dolphin-like inhabitants rebel against Imperial fishing quotas that had nearly driven their species to extinction. Human naval forces helped them reclaim their oceans and restore their traditional way of life. Desert planet Sands of Sorrow erupted in revolution when its nomadic tribes learned that humans were fighting to free the galaxy. The tribal warriors used their knowledge of the harsh environment to trap Imperial forces in sandstorms, while human air support picked off enemy ships. Even the gas giant colonies where aliens mined fuel for Imperial ships joined the rebellion when human engineers showed them how to turn their industrial equipment into weapons. The floating cities became fortresses that Imperial forces could not capture. The speed of the human advance shocked Imperial commanders who had expected a long, difficult war. Instead, they found themselves retreating on every front as species after species rose up to join the human cause of liberation. General Corvus, the Empire's chief military strategist, studied reports coming in from across the galaxy and realized that the humans had not just started a war, they had ignited a revolution. Every species that had ever been helped by humans was now fighting for freedom. The Imperial war machine that had conquered the galaxy through 10,000 years of careful planning and overwhelming force was being dismantled, in a matter of days, by enemies who fought not for conquest, but for justice. Human battle groups struck at Imperial supply lines, cutting off fuel and ammunition to enemy fleets. Human intelligence officers activated spy networks that had been built over decades, revealing Imperial troop movements and weaknesses. The technology gap that had once favored the Empire was now reversed, as human weapons proved superior in every category. Imperial soldiers found themselves outgunned by enemies they had dismissed as primitive. Just days before, communications networks that the Empire used to coordinate their vast military machine were jammed by human electronic warfare specialists who had spent years learning Imperial codes and frequencies. Enemy commanders could no longer talk to their fleets. Most importantly, the moral authority that the Empire had claimed for 10 millennia was completely destroyed as the galaxy watched humans fight to protect the weak instead of conquering them. For profit, every battle won by human forces proved that there was a better way to live. The siege of Fortress Omega, the Empire's most secure military installation, lasted only 18 hours before human special forces found a way inside and captured the base without firing a shot. The supposedly impregnable stronghold fell to human ingenuity and determination. Emperor Malthus sat in his cell aboard a human prison ship and wondered how his perfect empire had fallen so quickly. He had ruled over 1,000 species and commanded fleets that could destroy stars, but 6 human children had brought down his entire civilization. Admiral Li Hyunwoo received surrender offers from Imperial commanders across the galaxy as they realized that continued resistance was hopeless. Some offered to switch sides and fight for the human cause of liberation, while others simply asked for mercy. The war that was supposed to punish humans for helping aliens had instead liberated the galaxy from 10,000. Years of tyranny species that had never dared to dream of freedom were now building new societies based on cooperation instead of fear. Captain Park Seojin stood on the bridge of Jiwon's garden and looked out at the stars, knowing that her friends' death had not been in vain. The 6 young humans who had wanted nothing more than to help alien children grow food had become the spark that lit the fire of galactic freedom. The empire that had seemed eternal and unchangeable was crumbling like sand in a hurricane. The galaxy was learning that there was something stronger than fear, and that was the human determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. In 72 hours, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, forever. The age of imperial domination was ending, and the age of cooperation and mutual aid was about to begin. All because 6 children had dared to help others, and their species had refused to let their sacrifice be meaningless. 5 hours after the execution ended, President Kim Tae-jin stood before a wall of screens, showing every human colony and military base scattered across the galaxy. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a fury that made even his oldest advisors step back as he began to speak. The message was simple and clear. Remember, the 6. Every human military commander, every colonial governor, every ship captain, and every citizen received the same 2 words that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. What the Galactic Empire did not know was that humans had been preparing for this day ever since they first encountered alien species. 20 years ago, human leaders had made a secret decision that their people would never again be helpless victims of superior technology. While other species had given up their weapons to join the Empire and relied on Imperial protection for their safety, humans had been building the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. They had hidden their preparations behind a mask of peaceful exploration and scientific research. Admiral Lee Hyun-woo received the activation codes aboard his flagship Soul's Revenge and immediately began broadcasting orders to the hidden human fleet scattered throughout the galaxy. Every cargo ship, every mining platform, every research station, and every civilian transport began to transform. The Soul's Revenge itself demonstrated the deception perfectly. On the outside, it looked like a simple exploration vessel with basic defensive weapons, but when the Admiral entered his command codes, the ship's true nature was revealed. Hidden panels slid away to expose massive weapon arrays that could crack Moon's Captain Park Seojin commanded, the battleship Jiwon's Garden, and felt her heart fill with pride and rage as her ship powered up its concealed weapon systems. For 2 decades, she had pretended to be a peaceful explorer, while secretly training for the war she knew would come someday. The mining ship Minho's workshop dropped its disguise and revealed that it was actually a mobile weapons factory that could build fighter craft and missiles faster than any Imperial facility. The workers who had been mining asteroids were actually engineers and technicians ready for war transport vessel Soyoung's Hope opened its cargo bays to release swarms of stealth fighters that had been hidden inside fake shipping containers. The pilots had been waiting years for this moment, and they launched toward Imperial targets with deadly precision. Medical ship Yuna's Healing transformed into a fortress, bristling with defensive weapons and advanced shields that could protect entire human colonies from Imperial bombardment. The doctors and nurses aboard were also trained soldiers ready to fight. Communications array Kyung-soo's voice began broadcasting signals that jammed Imperial networks and coordinated human forces across dozens of star systems. The technicians who had been studying alien languages were actually intelligence officers who knew every Imperial weakness. Within 1 hour of receiving the activation signal, the human fleet revealed itself to be 10 times larger and more powerful than any intelligence estimate had suggested. Every peaceful human outpost became a military stronghold ready for battle. The Empire had made a fatal mistake by assuming that humans were just another weak species looking for protection. They had never imagined that humans might be preparing to protect themselves and everyone else who suffered under Imperial rule. Admiral Lee Hyun-woo studied the tactical displays showing Imperial fleet positions throughout the galaxy and smiled grimly as he realized that human forces were already in position to strike at every major Imperial stronghold simultaneously. The plan had been years in the making. Human ships had been disguised as traders and explorers, while they mapped Imperial defenses and identified weaknesses human. Civilians had been placed in key positions throughout the galaxy to serve as intelligence agents when the time came. Captain Park Seojin led the first wave of attacks against Imperial border stations that had been left lightly defended because the Empire never expected anyone to challenge their authority. The stations were destroyed so quickly that they never had time to send distress signals. The human assault was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Instead of the massive fleet battles that the Empire was used to fighting, humans used small, fast ships that struck without warning and disappeared before Imperial forces could respond. Human commanders had studied every Imperial battle for 20 years and learned that the Empire relied on overwhelming firepower and massive ships that moved slowly but carried devastating weapons. The human strategy was exactly the opposite: speed, stealth, and precision. While Imperial dreadnoughts were designed to destroy planets, human ships were built to disable enemy vessels and capture them intact. The humans wanted to liberate the galaxy, not destroy it, and that meant preserving as much as possible while removing Imperial control. The first Imperial response came from Commander Zelvan himself, who ordered his fleet to attack the nearest human colony, expecting to find defenseless civilians. But when his ships arrived, they found a fortress that had been hidden for decades, waiting for this exact moment. The Iron Fist and its escort vessels opened fire on what they thought was a simple research station, but their weapons bounced harmlessly off shields that were more advanced than anything in the Imperial arsenal. The research station then revealed its true nature as a military command center. Zelvan watched in shock as hundreds of human warships seemed to appear from nowhere around his fleet. They had been hiding in the asteroid field using stealth technology that made them invisible to Imperial sensors, until they chose to reveal themselves. The battle was over in minutes, as human ships disabled every Imperial vessel without destroying them. Zelvan himself was captured alive, along with his entire crew, and taken prisoner aboard the Soul's Revenge, where Admiral Lee Hyunwoo was waiting to meet him. The Imperial commander could not understand how humans had hidden such a massive military force for so long, or how their technology had become so advanced without the Empire noticing. Lee Hyunwoo explained that humans were very good at keeping secrets when their children's lives depended on it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as human forces revealed themselves and struck at Imperial targets with coordinated precision. Every Imperial fleet commander found themselves outnumbered and outgunned by enemies they had never known existed. But the human war was not just about military might. It was also about liberation and hope. Human commanders sent messages to every oppressed species in the galaxy, telling them that the time for freedom had finally come. The Vorthons were the first to answer the call. Elder Thymel led his people in an uprising against the Imperial garrison that had been placed on Kepler 442b. To prevent any future unauthorized farming, the alien farmers fought with tools and determination. Other species that had been helped by humans over the years began to rebel against Imperial rule. Alien traders smuggled weapons to human forces, while alien scientists shared intelligence about Imperial weaknesses that they had been forced to keep secret. The galaxy was awakening from 10,000 years of Imperial oppression, and the spark that lit the fire of rebellion was the memory of 6 young humans who had died for helping alien children eat and alien families grow. Food President Kim Taejin spoke to the galaxy from Earth, and his words were broadcast on every frequency to every world. His message was simple: the Empire had made the mistake of killing human children for showing kindness, and now they would learn why that was the worst decision they could have made. He announced that Earth was declaring war not for conquest or revenge, but for the liberation of every species that had suffered under Imperial rule. The war would continue until every being in the galaxy was free to help their neighbors without fear of punishment. The human fleet that had been hidden for 20 years was now revealed in all its terrible glory. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers and weapons that made Imperial technology look like toys from a bygone age. Admiral Lee Hyunwoo transmitted a message to the Imperial capital informing them that human forces were now moving toward Nexus Prime itself. The Empire had 6 hours to surrender unconditionally or face the consequences of murdering innocent children. The Empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed, and that humans would go to any length to protect those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy was about to change forever. The trial of the 6 humans took place in the Great Court of Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Empire. The massive building could hold 1 million beings, and every seat was filled with representatives from thousands of species who had been ordered to attend and witness imperial justice. Jiwan stood in chains next to her 5 friends in the center of the enormous courtroom, looking up at judges who sat on thrones high above them. The judges were ancient beings from different species, who had served the Empire for centuries, and their faces showed no emotion as they looked down at the young humans. The charges were read by a mechanical voice that echoed through the vast chamber. The 6 humans were accused of unauthorized terraforming, unauthorized medical intervention, unauthorized technology transfer, and the most serious crime of all, making the Empire appear incompetent by solving problems that Imperial experts had failed to solve. So Young tried to speak in their defense, but she was told that criminals had no right to address the court directly. Instead, they were assigned a defense lawyer who was an Imperial citizen and who made it clear that his job was to make the trial look fair, not to actually defend them. The prosecution presented evidence of the humans' crimes, including recordings of them teaching farming techniques to the Vorthons, healing alien children without permits, and sharing Earth technology without Imperial approval. Every act of kindness was treated as an act of rebellion. Minho watched in disbelief as his soil treatment machines were described as weapons of mass destruction because they could change the environment of entire worlds. The prosecutor claimed that such dangerous technology in the wrong hands could destabilize the careful balance of Imperial control. Daehyun listened as his flights over Kepler 442b were called reconnaissance missions for a potential human invasion force. The Empire twisted every innocent action into evidence. Of a human plot to overthrow the established order of the galaxy, Yuna felt sick as her medical treatments of starving children were described as biological warfare experiments. The prosecutor claimed she had been testing human medicines on alien subjects without proper authorization from Imperial medical authorities. Kyung-soo realized that his reports back to Earth were being used as proof that humans were coordinating a galaxy-wide campaign to undermine Imperial authority. His simple progress updates were portrayed as intelligence reports for a human military operation. The defense lawyer made a half-hearted attempt to argue that the humans had acted with good intentions, but the judges dismissed this argument immediately. They stated that good intentions made the crimes worse because they showed that humans believed they were morally superior to the Empire. Witnesses from the Vorthon colony were brought to testify, but instead of speaking about how the humans had saved their world, they were forced to admit that they had accepted help without seeking Imperial permission first. Their testimony was used to prove that humans corrupted other species with ideas of independence. Elder Thymel was brought in chains to the courtroom and forced to watch as his human friends were condemned for the crime of helping his people. The old Vorthon tried to speak about how his grandchildren were alive because of human kindness, but he was silenced by the judges. The trial lasted only 6 hours because the outcome had been decided before it began. The judges retired for exactly 10 minutes to discuss the verdict, and when they returned, their decision was announced to the galaxy. The 6 humans were guilty of all charges and would Be executed by hanging as an example to all species. Ji-won felt tears running down her face. Not because she was afraid to die, but because she realized that the Empire would use their deaths to terrorize other species into never helping each other. Again, her sacrifice would make the galaxy a colder and crueler place. So-young held hands with her friends and told them she was proud of what they had accomplished, even if it had led them to this moment. She said that dying for helping others was better than living a long life doing nothing meaningful. Minho used his last words to tell the court that human technology would always be used to help people, not to hurt them. He said that no matter how many humans the Empire killed, there would always be others ready to fix what was broken in the universe. Dae-hyun looked up at the judges and told them that humans would never stop exploring and never stop helping others, even if it meant facing death. He said that the Empire could kill their bodies but could never kill the human spirit of discovery and compassion. Yuna spoke about the Vorthon children she had treated and said that every life saved was worth any price, including her own life. She told the court that healing others was the most human thing anyone could do, and she would do it again if she had the chance. Kyung-soo addressed the court in perfect imperial language and told them that communication and understanding between species was the key to a peaceful galaxy. He said that the Empire maintained control through fear, but humans offered something better, which was cooperation based on mutual respect. The execution was scheduled for the next day and would be broadcast to every world in the galaxy so that all species could see what happened to those who challenged imperial authority. The Empire wanted every being in the universe to watch 6 young humans die for the crime of kindness on the morning of the execution. The 6 friends were brought to a platform in the center of Nexus Prime, where billions of beings could see them die. The platform was surrounded by Imperial soldiers and overhead cameras that would carry their deaths to every corner of the galaxy. Commander Zelvan himself stood on the platform to oversee the execution, and he spoke to the cameras about how the Empire had no choice but to punish those who threatened the peace and stability that 10,000 years of Imperial rule had created. The hangman's nooses were arranged in a row, and each of the 6 humans was brought to stand beneath one. The executioner was a massive alien whose face was hidden behind a metal mask and whose job was to kill enemies of the Empire. Ji-won was first to die, and as the rope was placed around her neck, she looked directly into the camera and spoke her final words. She said that she had planted flowers on an alien world so that children could see beauty. And if that was a crime, then she was proud to be a criminal. Minho was next, and he used his last breath to say that he had built machines to feed the hungry and heal the broken earth, and he hoped that other humans would continue his work even after the Empire silenced his voice forever. So-young faced death with the same courage she had shown in life and told the galaxy that leadership meant protecting those who could not protect themselves, even when it cost everything. She said that true leaders served others, not themselves. Dae-hyun looked up at the sky one last time and said that he had flown among the stars to bring hope to distant worlds, and he would gladly fly that mission again, even knowing it would end in death. Yuna smiled even with the rope around her neck and said that she had healed alien children, because all children deserve to grow up healthy and happy, regardless of what species they belong to. She said that love was stronger than fear. Kyung-soo spoke in his clear voice about how talking and listening to each other was the only way different species could live together in peace. He said that the Empire used weapons to control people, but humans used words to build bridges between worlds one by one. The 6 humans were executed while the galaxy watched in horror or satisfaction, depending on which species they belonged to. The Empire had made its point about what happened to those who helped others without permission. But something unexpected happened as the executions were broadcast across the galaxy. Instead of being frightened into submission, Many species began to whisper about the courage of 6 young humans who had died for helping others. The Empire had meant to spread fear, but had accidentally planted seeds of rebellion on Earth. The execution was watched in shocked silence by billions of humans who could not believe that their children had been murdered for the crime of helping alien farmers grow food. The silence that followed was not the silence of defeat, but the silence before a storm President Kim Tae-jin stood in the Situation Room surrounded by military leaders and watched his species' children die on screens around the world. His hands shook with rage as he asked his generals a simple question. How long until our fleets are ready to remind the galaxy that you never hurt human children? Commander Zelvan stood on the bridge of his massive Imperial warship and watched the reports coming in from Kepler 442b. His cold reptilian eyes showed no emotion as he read about 6 young humans who had somehow made the dying world green again. In just 2 weeks, what should have been impossible had happened, and that made him very angry. The commander had served the Galactic Empire for 300 years, and in all that time, he had never seen any species solve problems so quickly. Empire preferred when planets stayed broken, because broken planets needed Imperial help, and Imperial help always came with a price that kept species under control. Zelvan had destroyed entire civilizations for much smaller crimes than unauthorized. Terraforming his ship, the Iron Fist was known throughout the galaxy as a bringer of death, and his crew of loyal Imperial soldiers had never questioned an order, no matter how cruel it seemed to others. The 6 humans were still working in the Vorthon fields when the first Imperial scout ships appeared in the sky above Kepler 442b. The small black vessels moved like hunting birds, circling their prey, and their sensors recorded everything the humans were doing. Ji-won was teaching a group of young Vortons how to plant earth flowers that could help clean the soil when the shadow of a scout ship passed over her. She looked up and waved because she thought all visitors to their world must be friendly, like the humans were. Minho was deep inside, one of his soil treatment machines trying to make it work even better when the Imperial scanners began recording his technology. He had no idea that every improvement he made was being studied by enemy engineers who wanted to steal his designs. So-young was in a meeting with Elder Thymol and other Vorthan leaders making plans to expand their farming project to help other struggling colonies when Imperial listening devices picked up every word of their conversation. The Empire now knew that the humans planned to help more worlds. Daehyun was flying over the mountains, looking for other areas that might need soil treatment when an Imperial fighter appeared next to his small ship. The pilot of the enemy vessel was recording everything about human flight technology, and following Daehyun back to the village. Yuna was in her medical clinic treating a Vorthon child who had been injured while playing in the newly green fields when Imperial bioscanners began analyzing the medicines she used. The Empire wanted to know what made human healing so effective. Kyung-soo was sending his daily report back to Earth about their progress when Imperial communication interceptors captured his transmission and decoded every bit of information he was sharing with his home world. For 3 days, the Imperial scouts watched and recorded while the 6 humans continued their work of helping the Vorthans. They had no idea they were being studied like insects under a microscope by beings who saw kindness as a form of rebellion. On the 4th day, Commander Zelvan received orders directly from the Imperial capital. The message was simple and clear. The 6 humans were to be arrested immediately and brought to stand trial for crimes against the natural order of the galaxy. The commander smiled for the first time in months because he finally had permission to do what he loved most: punish those who dared to challenge Imperial authority. His ship began moving toward Kepler. 442b followed by a fleet of smaller vessels filled with soldiers. The humans were sleeping peacefully in their small camp near the Vorthon village when the Imperial fleet arrived in orbit above the planet. The night sky suddenly filled with the lights of hundreds of warships, and the ground began to shake from the power of their engines. Ji-won woke first, because she was a light sleeper and she thought the rumbling sound was some kind of earthquake. She stepped outside her tent and saw the terrible sight of an Imperial invasion fleet hanging in the sky like metal storm clouds. She ran to wake her friends, but before she could reach them, bright lights surrounded their camp, and Imperial soldiers in black armor appeared from nowhere, carrying weapons that could stun or kill. The soldiers moved with the precision of machines and surrounded the 6 humans before they could even understand what was happening. Minho tried to reach for his communication device to call for help, but a soldier knocked it from his hands and crushed it under his metal boot. Soyoung tried to reason with the soldiers, asking them what they wanted, but they refused to speak to her. Dae-hyun attempted to run toward their ship, but more soldiers blocked his path and pointed their weapons at him. Yuna grabbed her medical bag, thinking someone might be hurt, but a soldier took it away from her and threw it in the dirt. Kyung-soo tried to use his translator to communicate with the soldiers in their own language, but they were not interested in talking. They had their orders, and those orders were to capture the 6 humans, alive. Elder Thymel and many other Vorthons came running from their village when they heard the commotion. They could not believe that anyone would want to arrest the humans who had saved their world from starvation. The old Vorthan leader stood between the soldiers and the humans and spoke in his most dignified voice, asking why the Empire wanted to take away their friends and helpers. But Commander Zelvan himself appeared in a column of teleportation light, and his presence made even the brave elder step backward. Zelvan was tall and thin like a walking skeleton covered in gray scales. His uniform was decorated with medals from 1,000 conquered worlds, and his voice was like the sound of breaking glass. When he spoke, every living thing on the planet could feel the coldness in his words. He announced that the 6 humans were under arrest for violating Imperial law by providing unauthorized aid to a member species. The crime was interfering with the natural development of alien civilizations, and the penalty was Death Ji-won found her voice and asked what law they had broken by helping hungry children eat and making dead soil come alive again. But Zelvan explained that the Empire had very specific rules about which species could help other species, and humans were not on the approved list. Soyoung tried to argue that helping others was not a crime, but a moral duty. But the commander laughed and said that morality was whatever the Empire decided it was. The Empire had maintained peace for 10,000 years by keeping different species in their proper places. Minho asked why the Empire cared if aliens learned better farming techniques. But Zelvan answered that knowledge was power, and power belonged only to those who served the Empire faithfully. Advanced farming was a privilege that had to be earned through centuries of loyal service. Dae-hyun demanded to know what gave the Empire the right to control who could help whom, but the commander simply pointed to his fleet of warships hanging in the sky above them and said that might made right in the galaxy. Yuna pleaded with Zelvan to show mercy because they were just young people trying to do good in the universe, but he replied that good intentions made their crimes even worse because they were spreading dangerous ideas about equality between species. Kyung-soo asked if they could at least say goodbye to their Vorthon friends, but Zelvan refused and ordered his soldiers to place restraining devices on all 6 humans. The metal bands locked around their wrists and ankles and made it impossible for them to move freely, as the humans were forced into an Imperial transport ship. Elder Thymel and his people began to cry and beg for their friends to be released. But the soldiers pushed the Vorthans away and threatened to arrest them too if they interfered with Imperial justice. The last thing the 6 humans saw of Kepler 442b was the green fields they had worked so hard to create and the faces of the alien children they had helped. Now those children were crying and reaching toward the sky as their human friends were taken away, Commander. Zelvan stood watching as his prisoners were loaded onto his ship, and he felt satisfied that justice was being served. The 6 humans had committed the ultimate crime of making the Empire look weak by solving problems the Empire had ignored, as the Imperial fleet left Kepler 442b behind and jumped into hyperspace, carrying the 6 humans toward their trial. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen to those who dared to show kindness without permission. The trap had been set, and sprung perfectly, and now the Empire would make an example of 6 young humans who thought they could change the universe one planet at a time. The morning sun on Kepler 442b painted the sky in soft purple and gold colors as 6 young humans stepped off their small transport ship onto the dusty ground of an alien world. The air smelled different here, like flowers mixed with metal, and something else they could not name. But it was not unpleasant. Jiwan was the first to kneel down and touch the soil between her fingers. She had studied plants her whole life on Earth, and now at 22 years old, she was finally on another planet, where she could learn about alien plant life. The dirt felt strange and cold, but she could sense life sleeping deep beneath the surface, waiting for the right touch to wake up. Minho adjusted his thick glasses and pulled out a small device that beeped and flashed with green lights. He loved machines more than people sometimes, and his job was to fix anything that broke during their mission. His backpack was full of tools and spare parts, and his mind was full of ideas about how alien technology might work differently than Earth machines. So-Yung stood tall and looked around at the empty landscape stretching to the horizon. She was their team leader, even though she was only 24, because she had a gift for making people trust her and follow her into dangerous places. Her voice was gentle, but when she gave orders, everyone listened without question. Dae-hyun was already walking around their ship checking every bolt and wire because he would be the one flying them home when their mission was complete. He had been flying since he was 16 and could pilot anything with wings or engines, or even things that just floated in space. His hands never shook, even in the worst storms. Yuna unpacked her medical supplies and set up a small clinic in the shade of their ship because she knew that where humans went, someone always got hurt or sick. She had gentle hands and a soft voice that could calm anyone in pain. Her bag contained medicines from Earth and also empty containers to collect alien plants that might help heal people. Kyung-soo activated the communication equipment that would let them talk to Earth and also to the aliens who lived on this world. He spoke 12 different alien languages and was learning 3 more because he believed that talking was always better than fighting. His translator device could handle most languages, but sometimes the real meaning got lost between different kinds of minds. The 6 friends had been chosen for this mission from thousands of young humans who wanted to explore space because they were the best at what they did, but also because they genuinely cared about helping others. The Galactic Academy on Earth had trained them for 2 years to work together as a perfect team. Their mission was simple in words, but complex in practice. They were supposed to study the plant life on Kepler 442b and see if Earth farming techniques could help the local Vorthan colonists who were struggling to grow enough food. The Vorthans were peaceful aliens who looked like tall, thin humans but with blue skin and 4 arms, and they had been farming this world for 50 years with limited success. 3 hours after landing, Kyung-soo made contact with the nearest Vorthan settlement. The alien voice that came through the speaker sounded tired and worried. The Vorthans had been expecting them but had almost given up hope because so many other species had promised help before but never came. The team loaded their equipment into a ground vehicle that Minho had assembled from parts they brought from Earth and parts he had improved with alien technology. The journey to the Vorthan village took 4 hours across rocky terrain that looked like nothing could ever grow there. When they reached the settlement, the 6 humans saw why the Vorthans needed help. The village was surrounded by fields of dying plants that looked like corn, but were pale yellow instead of green. The soil was hard and cracked, and the Vorthan farmers stood in their fields with their 4 arms hanging down in defeat. Elder Thymel was the oldest Vorthan in the village, and he had seen many seasons of bad harvests. He walked slowly to meet the humans. his blue skin wrinkled with age and worry. Spoke to them in halting Earth language because he wanted to be polite, but Kyung-soo quickly switched to fluent Vorthon, which made the old alien smile for the first time in months. The Vorthons explained that their crops had been failing for 3 years running. The soil was becoming more acidic each season, and their traditional farming methods were not working anymore. Many families had already moved away to other worlds, and those who remained were growing thin from hunger. Ji-won immediately got to work testing the soil with her equipment while Minho helped her by building better testing devices from spare parts. So-young organized the team and made plans with the Vorthon farmers, while Dae-hyun scouted the area from the air to map the fields. Yuna set up her medical station because she could see that many of the Vorthon children were showing signs of poor nutrition, and she wanted to help them feel better while the team worked on the long-term solution for their food problems. Kyung-soo spent hours talking with the Vorthons about their history and their traditional farming methods because sometimes the old ways contained wisdom that science had forgotten. He learned that the soil had been healthy for decades until some kind of change happened 3 years ago. Within 2 days, Ji-won had identified the problem. The soil was being poisoned by a mineral deep underground that was slowly leaking to the surface. This had never happened before because the mineral was usually stable, but something had disturbed it recently. The solution was actually simple if you had the right knowledge. Earth farmers had dealt with similar problems for centuries by using specific plants that could clean poisoned soil and by adding certain chemicals that could neutralize the harmful minerals. Minho worked day and night to build machines that could dig deeper than Vorthon tools and spread the cleaning chemicals evenly across the fields. So-young coordinated with Elder Thymal to organize work. Crews of Vorthons who wanted to learn the new techniques, Dae-hyun flew supply runs to bring more equipment from their ship and to scout for other areas where the soil might need treatment. Yuna continued treating sick children and started teaching Vorthon healers about human medicine that might help their people. Kyung-soo documented everything they were doing and broadcast regular reports back to Earth so that other human teams could learn from their experiences and help other alien colonies with similar problems. After 2 weeks of hard work, the miracle happened. The first green shoots appeared in the treated fields, and within another week the crops were growing faster and healthier than they had in years. The Vorthon children who had been weak and hungry started playing and laughing again. Elder Thymal cried tears of joy when he saw his grandson running through fields of healthy plants for the first time in the boy's life. The whole village celebrated and declared the 6 humans to be heroes and family members who would always be welcome on their world. But the success of their mission had been noticed by others in the galaxy. The Galactic Empire maintained strict control over all interactions between different species, and they had very specific rules about which species could help which other species and how much help was allowed. Unknown to the 6 young humans, their acts of kindness and their success in helping the Vorthons had been reported to Imperial authorities by automated monitoring systems that watched all border worlds for signs of unauthorized activity. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and they maintained their power by keeping different species separated and dependent on Imperial approval for any major changes to their worlds. They saw the human success on Kepler 442b as a direct challenge to their authority, as Ji-won planted flowers from Earth in a garden for the Vorthon children, and as her 5 friends continued their work of healing and teaching and building. Their actions were setting in motion events that would soon change the galaxy forever. The 6 humans had come to help aliens grow food, but they had unknowingly planted the seeds of revolution.